We burned the menu. By the time the stove remembered our names, the dining room had learned to clap on time. My name is Gabriel. I ran the line at Sorella, a narrow room with a low ceiling and a long memory, the kind of place that praised you when you behaved and steamed your glasses when you didn't. The man I loved was Raphael, front of house with hands that could quiet a table and a mouth that convinced wine to confess. We were good at being good. We were worse at being interesting. The city prefers the second. Sorella was owned by two sisters who didn't speak to each other except through me and the calendar. Our kitchen was 4 burners and a grill that had seen too many lies. I lived in my whites and in a walk-up with a window that turned into a mirror after 10. Raphael and I kept our rules on an index card taped to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a pear. Be home when you say. Tell the truth before the inventory. No crisis after midnight unless it bleeds. We didn't write the one that would have saved us because nobody admits it out loud. Do not audition for a story you have to star in later. The first night Julian came in, he sat at the bar and talked to his notebook. He was one of those food writers who made adjectives look like compliments someone might earn. He ordered the anchovies because he wanted to test us and the lamb because he wanted to forgive us. Raphael told him we had no specials and meant our whole lives. Julian laughed without insult. He had a photographer with him who didn't know what to do with his hands when he wasn't taking something. In the past light, I watched Julian try to figure out where the room kept its luck. You can tell a lot about a critic by how they watch the staff and how they watch each other. He watched Raphael the way a mechanic watches a good engine, admiring the hum, waiting for a cough. He watched me like I was a riddle at the back of the test. I plated lamb with shameless precision, touched parsley like a superstition, and sent it with a voice that wasn't a voice. Pick up 2 lamb, 1 anchovy hot. Raphael ran food himself, because the way he carried plates kept complaints from inventing themselves. We closed with the smell of time and someone else's perfume. Raphael poured a staff wine that tasted like applause. He said, "Don't flirt with the man who writes." I said, "I don't flirt, I season." He rolled his eyes and touched my wrist, a small habit that felt like home. Julian returned the next week alone, which meant a great many things I tried not to name. He asked if he could watch service from the end of the pass because he liked to see dishes before the dining room did. I told him that kitchens are not theater. He said, "They are for 10 seconds a plate." He held my gaze in a way that made me check the oven just to be sure we still deserved heat. He came on a night the city decided not to be cruel. We were short a line cook and the fryer threw a tantrum that needed therapy. Julian stood where the steam wanted him and didn't flinch. Between tickets, he asked me where I learned to love bitterness. I said I had X's and arugula. He asked if we'd ever do a tasting menu, and I said we were too honest to sell people that much desire at once. He smiled like I'd passed an exam he'd written for himself. Raphael read me at the sink. He always could. He dried a quart container like it might need comforting and said, "I don't want to share you with a paragraph." I said, "Then keep me busy." He said he had a plan. He always did. He invited Julian to a staff meal like it was a dare to behave. We ate in the courtyard, the 4 of us, me, Raphael, Julian, and the photographer who finally learned that forks were instruments. Pasta with sausage, salad that admitted its dressing, peaches that didn't need anyone's permission. Raphael told stories about tables that had forgotten their manners and remembered their appetite. Julian told stories about restaurants that had learned to describe their food like they were applying to be forgiven. I watched their mouths and hated myself for knowing who I loved and who was about to be a problem. It was Raphael who broke first. He met Nico, a bartender from a neighboring place with arms like promises, at an after-hours where everyone drank gin like they were owed courage. Nico came by Sorella late, leaned on the host stand like confession, and asked Raphael for a favor that sounded like a shift drink. I walked out of the walk-in into a gesture, the tilt of Raphael's head toward a mouth that wasn't mine, and felt the room do math. The next morning, Raphael put coffee in my hand and said, "I'm sorry," in the tense people use when they're hopping the word can time travel. I told him I had kissed Julian 2 nights before in the alley behind Sorella while the city practiced rain. I did not tell him how the first touch had felt like seasoning a pan, and not knowing whether the smoke meant ruin or readiness. I told him it had been brief because it had. I told him I hadn't wanted to stop because I hadn't. He put his hand on the table beside mine like he was asking a witness to be brave. We tried rules that sounded adult. No more afters unless the other one is in the room. No mouths on people we can see from the pass. No hunger we can't name in daylight. It lasted until the second Friday. Nico showed up with a bruise that needed a story and Raphael gave him one. Julian texted me a photo of light on his kitchen counter and a sentence that was only a question mark. I turned off my phone and cooked like virtue paid better. When we broke, we didn't break loudly. It was a Thursday. The sisters had fought about a trivet and lost. A table of 6 had insisted on reinventing pasta. After service, Raphael said he needed air, which is a sentence that usually means a door and sometimes means a person. He left. I cleaned the plancha like it was a prayer. I walked home past the wine shop where our tab had learned our names. Julian was waiting on my stoop with a bottle, and the face people make when they want to learn your mistakes. We went inside. I didn't turn on the light. The bottle was cold and his hands were warmer. He kissed me like a man who knew I still had time under my nails. I put my mouth on his throat in the place that tells truth first. He touched my back like a map. We took our shirts off with the competence of people who have been good long enough to trust bad form has something to teach. He asked if I wanted to stop. I said I wanted to be late to my own better judgment. We made out until the room forgot to judge us. We stopped when the radiator hissed because the apartment had learned to keep us honest when we didn't know how. Raphael didn't come home. I didn't sleep. The next night he kissed me in the kitchen at work like I was a dessert he had talked himself out of and then decided to order anyway. He said he wanted to stay. He said he wanted me to want him. He said he wanted to hate me and couldn't. I said I wanted him to be bored with anyone but me. We worked service like a duet, polite and precise, and the dining room thought we were fine because dining rooms love being fooled. Sorella's soft stream had been scheduled weeks before. The sisters wanted donors to feel the choreography. I told them kitchens are not museums. They said transparency sells wine. The city watched us through a phone propped on the pass while I seared fish and Raphael landed plates and Julian ate at the bar like a scene he hadn't pitched but wanted credit for. Nico dropped off citrus, because apparently that is a thing men can decide to do when they want to be seen as useful. The stream caught my hands, Raphael's smile, the shine of plates that meant respect. It did not catch the look Raphael and I gave each other when Nico and Julian stood too close near the host's stand, and the citrus cut too sharply to be an accident. After close, I lit the last burner and put the menu on the plancha. We were due for a change anyway. Paper curls when it admits heat. Raphael stood there with the extinguisher because he believes in insurance. Julian watched from the alley doorway like he had always been writing us and finally liked the draft. Nico leaned against the ice machine because men like him know how to make waiting look like a job. I watched the paper blacken and felt something that wasn't virtue and wasn't sin but understood both. I said, "We can't serve this anymore." Raphael said, "Then don't." Julian said nothing, which is how you can tell when a man knows the line that will make things worse. The next day I told Julian we were done. I did it the right way, in daylight, with a voice that didn't audition for pity. He nodded like a man who knows an honest door when it closes. He said he'd still write about the lamb because it had nothing to apologize for. He sent me a link 3 weeks later, 3 stars consistent with life, and a line about bitterness that landed like a favor. I texted back a thank you built from fewer words than I owed him. We stayed strangers with a history, which is the correct math for people who kissed in alleys designed for deliveries. I asked Raphael to stop texting Nico, and he said he already had. I asked if he meant it, and he said not yet. 2 days later, he moved to the couch without ceremony and back to the bed with intention. The sex we had was meticulous. He asked with his eyes. I answered with my hands. The lamp we never liked made us better looking than we deserved, and we turned it off anyway. He held me with the care I use on fish I refuse to overcook. We slept like we had borrowed the night from someone generous. There are things restaurants never tell you. One is that a good service repairs what daytime breaks. We cooked better. We laughed in the walk-in and meant it. We took turns being the one who apologized first. When Nico came in for a drink with someone else, Raphael poured with professional grace and didn't watch him leave. When Julian sat at the corner stool with a date who didn't know what to do with his hands, I sent a dessert on the house that didn't pretend to be sweet. Nothing exploded. Like most decent endings, ours just stopped detonating. We kept one ritual from the night of the stream. At the end of each month, we take the printed menu into the alley and burn it. We write the new one by hand the next morning with coffee that tastes like staying. The sisters pretend not to approve. The staff applauds the heat. The dining room never knows. Sometimes Raphael catches me looking at the past light like memory and says, "You here?" I say, "I am now," and he kisses the corner of my mouth like an oath. Sometimes he asks if I want to go see a show, and we don't because we are busy being the kind of men who don't make intrigue into a hobby. Sometimes I think about the alley and the radiator and what we kept off camera, and I know this. We will fail again, but maybe smaller. We will love again, but quieter. We will write rules on a card and ignore them when we have to, and forgive ourselves afterward. The apartment wants us to stop trying to be impressive. We are learning. We are burning what doesn't keep. We are plating lamb with shameless precision and sending it to a room that doesn't need to know who we almost were. When the night ends and the last burner cools and the basil remembers rain, we walk home together. We leave the light on only when we mean it. And in the morning, when the radiator hisses like gossip that has lost its edge, we choose to be boring and call it bravery.